Ready? Yes. Okay. The assembly is back in session, and I invite the Joy team to welcome us back. I've got the joy, 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 joy. Where? Where? Delightful. Welcome back to Synod Assembly. How do you make tap water into holy water? You boil the hell out of it. All right. As you remember what your name is by looking down at your name tag at your raffle ticket, look for the raffle number 9968268. 268. We have a winner. You get 2 delightful books. Yeah, excitement. Thank you. Woo, that's not me. The next number is 9968184. 184. How about 9968314? Woo! And to get us grounded as we enter into this time, I would like to tell you about a story where I used to play piano by ear. It is so much easier to use my hands. I'd like to call the assembly back into session, and we begin with videos celebrating our pastors and deacons who are celebrating 50 years in ministry or more.
Thanks again to Gary Eppelsheimer and Sonia Zeski for putting together those beautiful compilations. And thank you especially to the pastors who live that ministry so that we can walk into this church of love. I had a chance to hear many suggestions for how we engage in the rest of the afternoon. Many people want to continue engaging with the resolutions in this plenary 3. So I am going to propose, apparently I have the authority to impose, but I prefer to propose that right now we push everything back an hour and then do one more work on resolutions. Do 1 more hour's worth of work on resolutions and lose an hour of break. Because currently we have a 2-hour break at 4:30, from 4:30 to 6:30, which would mean a 1-hour break, but a richer sense of engaging with these resolutions. Our time continues tomorrow, but it's not much. We will in no way get to all 6 resolutions if we don't do this. Am I seeing any nods? Okay, great. And well, thank you. What I also encourage you to do is if your body needs a 2-hour break, please take it. Please take it. Except Sue Best, who is secretary and needs to pay attention. So if you have your agenda printed out in your bag or whatever, you can change the 1 o'clock, where we start with courageous stewardship, engage the budget, and have elections, from 1 to 2. Coffee will continue to be at 2:30. So that will be a slink out on your own for the coffee and tea addicts and slink back in, because they can't adjust to the bishop's whims as easily as you all did. 4 o'clock workshops. So the workshops will be in the same rooms and the same content, but they will be from 4 to 5:30 instead of 3 to 4:30. And then dinner, banquet dinner at 6:30. Does that make sense? Are we all on board? Thank you. So I now invite Jean Obi, Chair of Reference and Council, to read Resolution 3. Skipping the whereases, but please take a moment to read those because the makers crafted them carefully. And that may or may not work.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think it's working. Thank you, Madam Chair. Our next resolution is a memorial, and it's a memorial titled Reparations and Land Returns Memorial to the 2022 Churchwide Assembly of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Be it resolved that the Oregon Synod Assembly memorialize the 2022 Churchwide Assembly of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America to encourage all ELCA members, congregations, synods, ministries, colleges, seminaries, camps, associated organizations, and partners to become educated about the indigenous peoples who thrived prior to European contact on the land they currently inhabit, and to learn about and learn from the indigenous peoples who currently live within at least 100 miles of that land. And be it further resolved that the Oregon Synod Assembly memorialize the 2022 Churchwide Assembly of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America to encourage all ELCA members, congregations, synods, ministries, colleges, seminaries, camps, associated organizations, and partners to support creative programs resulting in reparations for stolen lands in partnership with indigenous peoples, including returning land and any structures built on it to Native tribes. And when direct return is not feasible or desirable by the tribes, to return the proceeds from the sale of land to the Native American Ministry Fund or other local Native-led ministries or organizations.
Thank you. I now call on one of the makers to bring the motion.
My name is David Eppelsheimer. I serve at Community of Christ Church in Washington County, and I move to approve this resolution.
It has been moved and seconded that we engage with this resolution 3, a resolution on reparations. Let's begin.
And to speak in favor of this motion, of this resolution, my fellow team members and I have decided to use my time to read the whereases.
Yeah.
Whereas in 2016, the churchwide assembly repudiated of discovery, acknowledging and repenting from this church's complicity in the evils of colonialism in the Americas, which continue to harm tribal governments and individual tribal members. And whereas such evils of colonialism include land theft and forced removal of indigenous peoples from their ancestral homelands, silencing their stories and ancestral practices rooted in their sacred land. And whereas in September 2021, the Church Council of the ELCA approved the Declaration to American Indian and Alaska Native People, which includes a commitment to encourage and support wherever possible the buyback and return of tribal land, and further commit to support creative programs resulting in reparations for stolen lands. And whereas every building owned by an ELCA congregation and organization, except those on reservations, is built on stolen tribal land, which continues to rob each generation of sustenance, wealth, life, ways, and the experience of familial relationships with the land itself, thus perpetuating historical inequity. And whereas Indigenous peoples are calling for restoration, restitution, and reparation, and whereas there is a growing reparations and land back movement in which families, churches, denominations, camps, universities, and other landholding organizations are returning land or providing compensation for the use of land to Indigenous tribes and nations. And whereas returning land to its original peoples is one significant and meaningful way for our church to demonstrate repentance, helping to move together toward collective healing and the restoration of Native sovereignty, opening the possibility for new life to come out of death. And whereas there are a variety of ways that ELCA congregations, ministries, and associated organizations can participate in reparations and land return, including transferring land and closed ministry sites to tribal nations, or inviting tribal nations into conversations about land use when congregations are consolidated, etc.
Thank you, Pastor. I now invite debate on the resolution, and I'll remind you, it helps a lot if you would line up at the no microphone or the yes and bring only one card up. And I'm one who loves ambiguity and ambivalence, so I get, but it helps us keep track. And if you're bringing up a white card, you can line up in either one, but you do need to line up for most of those. Pastor.
Pastor Sylvain Nelson Gooden, interim at Salt and Light Lutheran in Portland. Today, as Reverend Erica Spate reminded us, we are gathered here on the lands of the Wasco, Warm Springs, and Paiute peoples, past, present, and future. I invite us to pause for a moment and listen again. We are gathered on Native people's land. When we gather in our congregations and ministry sites, we are gathering on Native people's land. Land acquired violently, and for the most part, absolutely legally, according to both the church and the state of the colonizers. The ELCA, along with many other denominations, has now declared publicly that although legal, the forced removal and dispossession of the land of sovereign nations and peoples was morally and ethically wrong and not the way of Jesus. This memorial for your consideration today is very simple. It simply offers us a pathway to discover each in our own unique contexts, how we might collectively offer our small part toward the healing of the suffering caused by these wrongs. And while for a whole host of reasons Bishop Lori mentioned this morning, the anxiety and fear and grief within our church is huge and understandable right now, I believe God is giving us a tremendous gift for just such a time as this. And that gift is the ears to finally hear and the courage to finally heed the centuries-old call for reparations. In the case of this memorial, that call is from our Indigenous siblings. The gift God is giving us right now is the eyes to see, as Dr. Abram lifted up this morning, our profound interconnection with all life and how our destinies are inseparable from one another. The gift God is giving us right now is the opportunity as the church to demonstrate repentance in a culture that scorns it. The gift God is giving us right now is the freedom to let go and discover that the call to restoration, reparation, and restitution is not a burden being imposed, but a blessing being imparted. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. Yes, microphone, Marilyn.
Thank you. Marilyn Keller from Augustana Lutheran Church in Portland, Oregon, worship leader. I represent a worship space, a worship scene in a beloved community that can boast of 20+ tribal nations represented in our congregation. We stand again in a moment in time where we as a church body have the opportunity to repair the torn lives and the torn times that we stand in. I would like to submit to the record a piece of music that I sang as part of a piece called The Territory. My son, my body is returning to my mother earth, and my spirit is going very soon to see the great spirit chief. When I am gone, think of this country. You are the chief of these people. They look to you to guide them. Always remember, your father never sold his country. You must stop your ears whenever you are asked to sign a treaty selling your home. A few more years and the white man will be all around you. They have their eyes on this land, my son. Never forget my dying words. Never sell the bones of your father. Never sell the bones of your father and your mother. These are the words from the great chief Joseph to his son of the Nez Perce. These were his last words to him as he lay dying. Never sell the bones of your father and your mother. There is a Nez Perce tribal purchase that took place within the last 5 years. They repurchased 148 acres in the Wallowa Mountain area near Joseph. So this is possible. If the tribes themselves can gain the money to do this, we can help them gain the money to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I unfortunately have to ask you not to applaud. Red mic.
My name is David Leverins. I'm from Calvary Lutheran Church in Grants Pass. It will sadden me to vote no on this because I'm very supportive of the underlying purpose of the memorial. I'd like to read something that I wrote to my church council when I explained to them how I will vote on this. The term stolen land is unfortunate in that it boils down an extremely complicated history into two words, void of any common definition, and thus open to vastly different viewpoints. It's true that historically indigenous peoples in Oregon were in many ways mistreated or treated shamefully during the period of Western expansion. In many cases, their land was in fact stolen. So I wish the memorial included more context. The first part of this memorial, encouraging us to learn more about our land history, is an excellent objective, which will result in a better appreciation of how we can be better neighbors and better Christians as it relates to others who do not look like us. The second part, encouraging land givebacks, is in large part impractical and due to its oversimplification of the issues, inappropriate as it is written. I support the underlining proposal. I just wish it had been written in a way that wasn't in some ways inflammatory to people who have honestly felt opinions that differ, recognizing that Christians, many times after prayerful considerations, feel differently. And memorials, I think, should be written in a way that tend to create consensus rather than division. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Yes, microphone.
I'm Marcy Newton, Grace First Lutheran Church here in Bend, Oregon. And Bishop Laura, you said in starting this session after lunch that we needed to vote our faith. And for me, that means looking to scripture. And that brought to mind, first of all, on Good Friday, the scriptures that were read opened my eyes to the fact that there never has been, nor will there ever be in human history, a greater injustice than that happened on the cross. And in that context, I've been praying since then that we would, as human beings, as God's created beings, we would be doing the hard work of breaking down and removing the kind of pain and anger and divisiveness that has come from all the human inflicted injustices in this world, whether it's these we're talking about today or many, many more throughout history. And then in going to my Bible and having called on 2 Chronicles 7:14 for comfort so many times in the last 2 years, those verses that say, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear them from heaven and I will forgive their sin and will heal their land. In revisiting this verse that I've claimed to find hope in what God will do, hear from heaven, forgive their sins, that's another key word for you right here, and heal their land. I was confronted by the idea that I'm ready to embrace all that, but I needed to look at what it said about what I'm called to do. This verse talks about my people, which is the church, the body of Christ. But I'm one of them. And who are called by my name, Christians, followers of Christ, so that we need to model Christ. If they will humble themselves, and I went to Philippians 2:1-8 to look at what it says about Christ humbling himself. And it starts with, in verse 1, being united with Christ, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. And let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Philippians 2:6 goes on to speak to how Christ humbled himself, being in the very nature of God, did not consider equality with God as something to be used for his own advantage. Oh, I got to go fast. Okay.
I think it's time.
Oh,
Thank you,
Those
Marcy.
verses speak for themselves. I don't have to say anymore. Praise you, Lord.
Thank you. Do you have a point that precedes others, Pastor Nielsen?
I think so.
Okay,
So for a point of order, Dorothy Nielsen, interim pastor at Grace in Corvallis. I am interested in knowing what kind of engagement the team had with any of our tribes here in Oregon. I don't know what the representation on the committee was, but it seems to me that engagement would be important. I know some of our Indigenous siblings didn't have the concept of ownership of land. And so I need more education. And so I'd like to know if the committee had engaged.
thank you. Does a point of information take priority?
It's a question to one of the makers.
So it does. So it takes priority right now? Oh, right. Thank you. So yes. Does one of the makers have a response? Oh, here comes Pastor Solvay. Okay.
Yes, so we, on the team, we do not have any Indigenous representation on our team right now. We understand and are very aware of that gap, and we are hoping to move forward on that. The resolution as it, or the memorial as it stands, is an invitation to do exactly that work, Pastor Nielsen. But I will say that we did work directly with Vance Blackfox, who is the ELCA Director of Indigenous Ministries and Tribal Relations. He was very involved. We asked his counsel, and he was very delighted to participate in helping us craft this language in a way that was truthful and effective and forward thinking and respectful.
Thank you. And that's a good reminder. The motion on the floor, my mistake, is not a resolution, but a memorial, which if passed, will go to the churchwide assembly in August. Pastor Anthony.
Hi, Revelation, how do I say it? Anyway, at Augustana. I want to be careful here to be respectful. But I have to say that as an African-American male, I've heard all of my life that slavery happened back then. I had nothing to do with it. I have heard all of my life that you're going to get your rights one day. I want to say that I knew this in the back of my head because in my community, I have heard the stories of this, but I didn't know the realism of it, the truth of it until recently when I did some research on this, that in my lifetime, there has been slaves in this country. There was a story of an African-American woman who didn't know that African-American people had been freed. This was in 1973. 1973, she had no concept of airplanes, running water, cars, or any of that until she decided to run from slavery. And it was almost run over, passed out, terrified her. I have heard all of my life that one day, no, today is the day. Right now is the time when we know a wrong has been foisted upon a people. Now is the time. And did they own every piece of land? Because they're right. I just heard a young lady say, do they have a concept of ownership? Maybe not, but the consequences of the land being taken from them is still felt to this day. The right to self-govern is still felt to this day. The right to love one's heritage is still being taken away. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one at the red microphone, Pastor Knudsen.
I think Reverend Latham, my colleague, said it all, but I just have to say something. And when I was 22 out of the University of Oregon, I went to work with the Job Corps in Astoria, so I know Astoria well. If you were not Finnish, you were a minority, great people in Astoria, believe me. But my students at the Job Corps that I taught at Tongue Point Job Corps were from Pine Ridge, Athabascan students from Alaska, young men and women from Harlem, East LA, small town Iowa. It was the vision I saw growing up in the church. That's what the church needed to look like. As a 22, I realized that. That's the only reason I went back to seminary 7 years later. But we started clubs because there are no staff of color. Well, Roberta Rubio, my colleague, chef de cuisine, was running the kitchen. We started cultural clubs. And we did powwows. We had Black History Month in Astoria. We had students at various events. We sat down with the police force who was harassing young people from LA, young men wearing their bandanas and plaid shirts, talked about dress and style. They were not gang members. I make that point because we took the students from Pine Ridge and other tribal members, about 60 students, on a tour of Oregon because everything on the coast is named after tribes. And their question from other places, where are the tribal members? What's happened? We talked about diseases and we talked about violence. We had to come to Portland to meet with leaders, Edmo Sr., not Edmo today that you all know, and talk about it. And it was so powerful, and it was a wake-up call for me. Two of my best mentors, Marlene Rabbit Helbel, we were on staff churchwide together, and our first associate when I got to Augustana, one of the greats in this synod. Vance Blackbox was the last president of the youth organization when I left Chicago. Karis Golden, an African-American who writes for the Lutheran, was there as a vice president. And the story after story after story of we can do this someday. It's always someday in the future. Do you realize how many tribal members in the state don't realize you can smudge in a Lutheran church? You can drum. You can have liturgies that come out of indigenous cultures that are powerful. Just opening our doors to begin with, but taking this action today will speak volumes. With intentional, we need to have a Synod Development Committee that is a nonprofit to do economic development, to do exactly what we're proposing today. Not individually, but together we can do that and start to really make change. Let us, as Reverend Lathan said, let us do it now. Oh, there's other people. I'll stop. Ramona Soto Rank was the first associate pastor with me. First Native American woman ordained in Oregon. And in our church still is a big banner from the Lakota Club, from the state penitentiary. All the Native American indigenous leaders there made this huge banner of the Great Spirit rising Jesus in honor of her ordination. And that still hangs today as one of our primary pieces, and people feel welcome.
Thank you.
So is that 3 in a row was interrupted by a white card?
Okay, so Jaya. Oh, that's a white card. Okay, yes.
I could, I will vote yes, but I am bringing this as like a question about, I'm Jaya Concert Lapham and Grace Lutheran in Corvallis, and I just have questions about the spirit of our work and recognizing whose work we're doing and who we're asking to work. So I am in favor of building relationships with tribal members and giving them resources. And I just want to kind of broaden the scope beyond tribe, thinking of tribe as one type of entity we're interacting with, but recognize the first peoples across the world who have migrated into our communities and out of our communities. And to just broaden the thinking about whose reparations these are for, because the displacement is continuous throughout and is continuing to happen to communities that have languages that are not English or Spanish, right? And so we just need to keep them in mind as we work. And I'm cautious that we wouldn't be committed to the whole family of the people who are elders, the people who have newborns, the people who we want to give reparations to are busy caring for their members and their family and their tribe. And I want the LCA to honor and respect historical trauma and their daily toils, and find the spirit in the outreach that we do, that we're showing up with interest that's informed and spiritually grounded and responsible to learn within the context of the impacts that we're making.
Thank you. Are you proposing an amendment?
I suppose this might be a whereas, but it is important to me that this is very open and vague, and that we need to continue to develop our consciousness about what we're talking about. So, and I'm thankful for the work that we do together. But reparations are based, what do you have?
No, keep going.
Okay. Reparations are to, it's like we need to repair relationships, but we have to realize that they are fractured and broken. Yes. And there's a lot that we need to repair within our own responsibility for how we feel about this and how we act.
Thank you. So rather than a whereas, it's proposed that you write all of this down for the Synod Council, who will be responsible for the enacting of this should it pass, or at least fleshing it out for churchwide.
I'll write something.
Okay, thank you. Green microphone.
Alice Allward from Pilgrim Lutheran Church in Portland. My name is on this. I'm very much in favor of it. And I wanted to make clear to people who may have some questions about language, such as stolen lands. That language, for the most part, came out of documents that were already approved of by the ELCA churchwide. So it's not something that we, when we crafted this, came up with out of the blue or out of our own ideas. It comes from those documents. This is a request, as a memorial is. It's not a resolution saying, we, the Oregon Synod, will do something. It is saying, we, the Oregon Synod, believe that churchwide should do something. And in this case, the something is put a little more teeth into what you've already said you're going to do. We, as a collective of the churchwide, do more, educate more, encourage people to educate themselves, encourage congregations to do more. So it doesn't require anything, but it is a strong request to do something. And it's important for those who might think that this is not strong enough, and I'm one of them, it's important to say, we have to start somewhere, and we have to continue something. And that's what this resolution is. So for me, this is a matter of conscience. I cannot not do something because I am profoundly moved by the history, and not just the history, but the ongoing nature of the oppression that has been felt in this country from the stolen land aspect. So I ask people, even if you don't agree or if you have questions about the language not being quite right, please do not obstruct the work of those who are called to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Green microphone.
I won't cry this time. Everybody's used to seeing me cry. I cry all the time. There's a saying, and I'm just going to say it, and then I'm going to go sit down. There's a saying, it says, oh, excuse me.
Oh, yes. Thank you for catching.
Okay. I'm Marie Wesson from Faith Lutheran Church in Klatskanai, Oregon.
Thank you.
Done is better than perfect.
Thank you. Red microphone.
I'm not saying no. I am Pastor Jessica from St. Matthew in Beaverton, and I move the previous question.
Okay, so as you'll recall, oh, it requires a second. Thank you. This moving the previous question is a motion that we debate. It requires a 2/3 vote. We are not now voting on the resolution. We are voting on whether or not we end debate. Ready, everyone? Yes? No, I mean, wait a minute. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? Yes. Okay. If you're in favor of ending debate, raise your green card. Thank you. If you are opposed, red card. There's no need for abstentions, is that right? It looks as though debate is ended. Which means now we are voting on the resolution. Oh, the memorial. It is a memorial which will, it's called Reparations and Land Return Memorial to the 2022 Churchwide Assembly of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Voting is open. If you are in favor of this memorial, raise your green card. This requires a 51% majority. Thank you. If you are opposed, raise your red card. Thank you. If you abstain, thank you. Voting is now closed and resolution number 3, memorial, is passed. Thank you very much. No, unfortunately, we can't applaud. So we'll move along then to resolution number 4 on inclusive call. Take a minute while Jean Obi, Chair of the Reference and Council Committee, walks to the podium to read the whereases silently in your heart. And he will read the resolves. Oh, and the maker, be prepared. In fact, get at the mic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our next resolution is titled 2022 Inclusive Call Process Resolution. Be it resolved that the Oregon Synod must act on our knowledge and certainty that Christian faith and inclusiveness is about lived commitment, not simply right belief. And be it further resolved that the Synod Council encourages the Oregon Synod staff to bring a perspective of diversity, equity, and inclusion when assisting a congregation throughout the call process, and tools and strategies to encourage each congregation in their efforts to create a hospitable and supportive environment toward a more consistently inclusive mobility or call process. Also, that Synod Council encourages the Oregon Synod staff to include reflections on the impact of such efforts in the reports to the Synod Council, and be it further resolved that the Synod Council will encourage the Oregon Synod staff to listen to suggestions from BIPOC laypersons, BIPOC clergy, and the Synod reparations team when they routinely update the Oregon Synod Transition Manual to compile and codify a set of practical and actionable changes based on information and stories from or about the underrepresented, designed to equip congregations in creating a more hospitable and supportive environment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And now invite one of the makers to move adoption of this resolution.
Madam Chair, I'm Gary Selstad, a maker from Creator Lutheran Church, Clackamas, Oregon. I make a motion to adopt this resolution.
Is there a second? Thank you. Okay, please, 3 minutes.
2 years ago, the Oregon Synod Assembly overwhelmingly passed a resolution to study reparations, from which formed a reparation task force to prepare resolutions and memorials for today's assembly to consider. And this is one of those resolutions. The assembly also wisely stipulated that the dominant voices guiding the task force not be of European descent. With less than 5% representation in leadership positions in Oregon, this did become a challenge. Why are there so few leaders of color in Oregon? When you ask those potential leaders, They point to the state's past history, current prejudice, and institutional racism. The potential pool of qualified people is another consideration. There is not a single solution to address this. Many of us who have become reconciling in Christ congregations learned the power of explicit welcome. Currently, an obvious place to express a congregation's openness to consider non-white leadership is in the ministry site profile. Unfortunately, even if a ministry site profile contains this explicit welcome, only a piece of it is seen by potential candidates nationwide. Ideally, this resolution starts our ongoing learning about the best ways to express the openness of congregations towards a living, loving, inclusive call, and holds ourselves accountable to that.
Thank you. Is there more speaking to this resolution on the Synod call process? Pastor.
Mark Knutson, Augustana Lutheran Church, Portland, a thriving, multicultural, multinational, multi-generational sanctuary solar congregation. I say that because I speak on behalf of the congregation and my wife Tamara, and our son Brandon, and Francisco's daughters, and Marilyn's brother, nephew, Nick, who's one of only 10 Black architects in Oregon. And we've all been working at this piece for years. There's my mother-in-law just died, Gladys Reynolds, 86. And you can never look at each other and assume what our family systems look like. And we, each of us has more diversity than we know, but half of my family is African-American descent, Commerce, Texas, my wife's family. We met 42 years ago. Finally got married 36 years ago. She didn't want to marry a person with a collar because she grew up Roman Catholic. But I convinced her. But the stories is, and my mother-in-law, Gladine, we had a service last week at St. Andrew's Catholic Church in 9th and Alberta. She was a leader in the Catholic Church, started the gospel choir, but she and the elders in our family system gave everything they had to educate their young. Came by Greyhound bus from Commerce, Texas, which is one of the most racist places in the country back then. Black side of the tracks, white side of the tracks. But she didn't want to raise her 4 daughters in the Jim Crow South. So she followed her husband, who was in the military, up to Oregon, and the family system came up and settled in the Northeast where it was redlined. They put every dime they had into educating the young. So last week when we gathered around, we have lawyers in the family system, we have economists, we have musicians, we have truck drivers, we've got fishermen, all from the African-American community. My son, how can I say it? The talent and leadership is all around us. It's all around us. When we open our eyes, when we create systems with our own systems that allow people to thrive and take leadership roles. My son joined a cohort, 1 minute, I'll make this quick, of 250 young leaders of color from around the country. UCLA and Columbia put this together. He was in finance out of USC. And at 28, he went back and they applied to get into the best business schools in the country because they want to break open the system in America of corporate leaders all being white. Not anymore, so. And he ended up at Wharton, got his degree, and now he's in New York City. And you know what his portfolio is? The 30-year-old man, 6'3". I have to look up to him. It's green energy. He's an investment counselor for other investors. So rural America, you've got a man grew up in Portland who's doing the work to find tractors that are electric or he's been with John Pepe. And my point is this, I get passionate. We need to work hard to create systems that allow our young leaders from the BIPOC community to thrive and take leadership. Every job I've left, a person of color or a woman's following by intent. We have to be intentional and work hard at it. And we can do this because the leadership is all around us. And let me say it's a gift to us all.
Thank you. Pastor.
I am Pastor Emerson Remy Remmers from Prineville, Oregon of Our Savior's Lutheran Church. As a queer disabled pastor who waited over 1.5 years for a call after graduating from seminary, this speaks a lot to me. And I watched the people that I graduated in my class get calls in order of privilege, as in the able-bodied cishet white men got it first, then the able-bodied cishet white women, and then step by step in terms of our privileges, that's how we got it, ending with me, the last in line. There is a lot of pain and waiting, and there's a lot of joy now where I am. I love being in Prineville, Oregon, and I'm so thankful and willing, they were willing to have the conversation with me and get to know me. Yes, it has been bumpy at times, that is expected, but forcing people to have conversations is incredibly important because things only change with relationship. And so I am fully in support of this because I know the pain of waiting. And I'm glad that I had the resources of my parents and friends to rely on in that wait, but it was still painful. Thank you.
Thank you. Red microphone.
John Moss from Calvary Lutheran in Grants Pass. This is a question. Is there a way for us to get a report back to the Synod how they plan to implement this? Because we pass these things and then we never hear anything more about them. And it would be nice to have some kind of a provision that says at the next assembly, the council will bring forth a plan.
I really love that. And I would love to hold the Synod Council more accountable too. Would you put that in writing and we can take it to the Synod Council? I know you don't like to write, but would you please? Thank you. Green microphone.
Des Valdez, Prince of Life, Oregon City. I am currently in seminary at Claremont School of Theology, and I have had the wonderful privilege of having classes with people of all racial and cultural backgrounds throughout my time in seminary, and taking classes from professors who come from a broad spectrum of backgrounds as well. And I know that I am so much richer for having had that experience. And as a person who is hoping to enter ministry in the Synod, I want my future colleagues to represent all of Oregon and to represent all of the people in it, because I know that will make me a better pastor in the future and will make all of my other colleagues better pastors, to have a broad representation of who humanity is and who we all are. So I am very much in favor of anything that is moving towards pushing us in a direction where clergy are able to represent that diversity that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more speaking to the resolution?
Merritt Finkel, Central Portland. I speak on behalf of, as the co-president of Reconciling Christ Northwest, Reconciling Works Northwest, on behalf of our 38+ Reconciling Christ member congregations who speak collectively in support of the measure.
Thank you, Merritt. Levita Gilmore Jones.
Yes, I'm Levita Gilmore Jones, member of Salt and Light Lutheran in Portland, Oregon. And I speak to this resolution from my heart and also from an equity lens, because the last time we came together as a Synod, Bishop Laurie was elected bishop of the Synod, of our Oregon Synod. And I inadvertently entered a room after the election and her selection. And it was a space where all of the women who were clergy and deacons in the Oregon Synod were invited to come and to bless her. And when I walked in that room, I wasn't supposed to be there. I was headed someplace else, but as I looked around, there was not one person of color in that space. There was no representation of anyone of color in that room. And so it struck me, and I shared that with Bishop Laurie, and I'm glad to see this resolution. I have no intention of becoming clergy.
Just so we know.
But I do want anyone else, any other person of color in this state who wants to live into their vocation, to have an opportunity to not be the only person in the room. And our Salt and Light right now is going through our call process. And we are being accompanied by Juan Carlos. And as we go through that process, we are asking ourselves, how are we as a congregation going to pay attention to equity, diversion, and inclusion in our process? This congregation is a primarily white congregation, but the people in that congregation have relationships outside of the community. So I encourage us to hold the Senate Council accountable and to support our staff that is committed to doing this work.
Thank you. Francisco.
Yes, Francisco Aguirre from Augustana Lutheran Church. And I support this 100%. You know, I've been hearing talking and I just ask myself, you know, and maybe you can ask yourself, where God is put in all those barriers where people of color don't have the same opportunity? Why we asking for a degree? Where Jesus asking for degree to follow his step? I don't see that anywhere in the Bible. But when I try to be ordained, you know, find a way to be ordained one day, they always say no, because you never have a proper education. You don't have a formal school. What is going on in the world? You know, I want to share with you that one day I fall asleep in the couch. And then I heard a voice saying, no, don't worry, I'm holding you, so you're not going to fall. But I was dreaming that I was there in front of somebody. I don't know who that somebody was that was ordaining me to be a pastor. And when I was only 6 years old, I remember everybody called me Padre Paquito. Thank you.
Thank you. Red microphone.
Doug Snell, Our Savior's Lutheran Church in Lebanon. I have an amendment to the motion. Can I do that?
Yeah, right. Yes.
Resolved that the Senate Council will report at the next Senate Convention on what has been done to implement this resolution should it pass. You want this?
Yes. Do I hear a second? Excellent. So now we're no longer debating the resolution. We are debating the amendment. And let me read it one more time so we all know what we're talking about. We'll just stretch our shoulders while they have a discussion, since they're similar in mind, these two. Breathe, stand, tilt. So we're going to debate that amendment. Yep. Thank you. Let's continue. We have 7 minutes. And we have an amendment on the floor. I will read it. The amendment from Doug says this: it would be adding one more resolved to this resolution on the call process. Resolved that the Synod Council will report at the next Synod Assembly, I'll make that minor edit, on what has been done to implement this resolution, should it pass. So any speaking to the amendment? Yes, microphone.
Pastor Melinda Wagner, First Emmanuel Lutheran. I think it's a great amendment. I think we should pass it.
That's a model of succinctness. Seeing no one else at the microphone on this amendment, let us vote. Yes? All right, so wait a minute. We are voting on the amendment from Doug, the motion to amend from Doug Snell, Lebanon, Our Savior's Lebanon. All those in favor, voting is now open. Raise your green cards. All those opposed, red. Abstentions, white. This amendment is received, passed, etc. I'll get all the verbs till I'm right. And now we'll go back to debating the resolution. As amended. Pastor Linda.
Linda Mueller, Christ the King Lutheran Church. I call for the question.
Okay, all right. We're calling for the question on the resolution. So as you know, we need to vote on that. Second, many seconds. So we'll vote on this. It requires a 2/3 majority vote to end debate on this call process resolution. If you're in favor of ending debate, voting is now open. Raise your green card. Thank you. If you're opposed to ending debate, raise your red. That was a unanimous, one in the back. Almost unanimous. So abstain? Do we do that for this? No. All right. So we are now voting on the resolution itself. Thank you, as amended. So in 1 second, voting will be open on the resolution called 2022 Inclusive Call Process Resolution. If you would like to vote for it as amended, this is voting on the resolution itself, raise your green card. Thank you. Red card opposed. White card abstain. Congratulations, Oregon Synod. You now have passed a resolution on a more inclusive call process. And we're not supposed to clap, I think. And congratulations, because you have exactly 3 minutes to stretch, move about. Coffee will be in the back in 30 minutes. And then we will hear. So don't move, just stand up and stretch. I mean, you obviously can, but don't make it a big thing. We're just standing up and stretching because the Courageous Stewardship Table will be with us in 3 minutes. We're not, nothing was planned. Hi. I'd like to invite, as you have a seat, the Courageous Love Table or Courageous Stewardship Table. This is a team that's been meeting and would love to share with you what they've done. It's one of the most organized, energetic, and genuinely courageous teams that we have in the Oregon Synod. So I introduce to you the Courageous Stewardship Table. Via a slideshow, apparently. This is what happens when the person doing the slides has a body and has bodily needs. Why don't we sing a song? In the Lord I'll be ever thankful. In the Lord I will rejoice. Look to God, do not be afraid. Lift up your voices, the Lord is near. Lift up your voices, the Lord is near. In the Lord I'll be ever thankful. In the Lord I will rejoice. Look to God, do not be afraid. Lift up your voices, the Lord is near. Lift up your voices, the Lord is near. Thank you. Now a video from the Courageous Stewardship Table.
Good afternoon, beautiful ones. It is my pleasure and distinct honor to introduce you to the very first Courageous Stewardship Team.
Wait, whoa, wait. Can you hear me? Okay, there we go. Wait a minute, Melissa. What are you doing in that ridiculous muscle suit?
Well, duh, Jeannie, because we are not just the stewardship table, but the Courageous Stewardship Table. So we are fierce and we are strong. Nothing communicates strong like muscles, right?
Oh.
And I've also just secretly always wanted abs.
Melissa, haven't you been reading your Brene Brown lately? The Courageous Stewardship Table is not about muscles. The Latin root of the word courageous is core, and core means heart. The muscle we're talking about isn't your abs, it's your heart. And if you had read your script appropriately for the presentation today, you would have remembered that you were supposed to dress up as a heart. But I gotcha.
Right, Jeannie, thanks. We are the Courageous Stewardship Table of the Oregon Synod, and our mission is to connect the faith of our hearts as people and as communities of the Oregon Synod with the life that we are called to steward, our money, time, talent, bodies, building, land, to energize our way together toward our Synod horizon of courageous love, to become that wild web of courageous love that seeks the life of the world as we come alive together in the liberating spirit of Jesus. And Jeannie, did you know that in this room, we are around like 300 folks? That's a powerful 3% of the 114 ministries and 30,000 people of the Oregon Synod. I know that there is a lot of heart in this room and a lot of love. So let's discover a little bit of the love that is flowing among us. I've got a question for you, and you can also find it up on the slide. When you connect the faith of your heart to your money, your body and your stories and your time and your talents, what do you want to energize and empower in the world? What do you want to be true in our communities? This is a real question. Take a minute, ponder it. When you connect the faith of your heart to your money and your body and your time and your talent, what do you want to empower in the world? What do you want to be true in our communities? I would just love for you to shout out, like, yes, my money there, my time, my talent to make that true in my community. Let's just shout it out. I heard affordable housing. What else? A music school. Awesome, Marilyn. Let's work on that. Carbon neutral? Communities. Beautiful. Thank you. Healthcare for all. Thank you, Sue. What else? Childcare. What else? Robust Latinx ministry. Amazing. Thank you, Dorothy. So there are a lot of dreams and a lot of love in this community, right, Jeannie? We are about heart as the Courageous Stewardship Team, and there is a lot of heart, clearly, full of faithful hopes and dreams in this room. So when we come together and connect those hearts with our money and resources, we can make the dreams that you just shared, Maryland's music school, a reality. We are already a wild web of love and imagination. So I want to tell you a little bit about how we do this. We've talked about who we are and what we're about, but how do we do this? And that's mostly with your help. Can I have the next slide, please? First, we have our Appeals and Wild Web Storytelling Working Group. And this group tells the stories of the amazing life taking shape throughout our synod in your communities. Make sure that you subscribe to our Synod e-news to receive our monthly installments of the Wild Web, stories from around the synod. And if you have a story to tell, please let us know. We have our individual giving working group that supports members and friends of the synod to connect their hearts with their money and give to both the general fund of the synod and specific funds like the reparations fund that we have, working on actions of racial repair and healing. Next, we have our community giving working group, which supports congregations and ministries to connect their collective hearts, your collective hearts, with your money and give mission support to the general fund and to discern the additional giving to the various funds we have, like the Courageous Love Fund of the Oregon Synod that energizes all of the mission starts and synod vitality strategies in our synod. And finally, we have our Courageous Stewardship for Congregations working group, which nurtures a culture of courageous heart-to-heart generosity in your congregation and ministries. And we have an exciting opportunity, I'll let you know, coming up this fall in partnership with the ELCA and the Southwest Washington Synod. So stay tuned. Right after this Synod Assembly, you'll be receiving e-news updates about an upcoming cohort that you can bring congregational leaders to.
All this dreaming stuff is great. But Melissa, there's already loads of stuff that the Synod is doing right now with the giving that happens every single month from congregations and people across the Synod. And I really want to be sure that everyone here knows about the day-to-day stuff. It's not so flashy, but it makes all the ministry we do possible. So like the staff that put on this big shindig, the competent and warm humans to answer all the questions we call the Synod office for, and the organization required to keep a behemoth of a project like the Synod running on renewable energy of courageous love. Can we give a shout out to Jamae? And what about when any of our ministries go through a clergy transition? The support, guidance, and accompaniment we receive as we navigate discernment, discerning our sense of collective vocation and the call process, and all the faithful leadership development of that transition work. We got to lift that up. And what about the biblical and theological depth and culture setting needed to keep us moving together in the spirit of Jesus so that all that new life can spring forth? Synod Day of Learnings, the Psalm Lay Education Program. Personally, I give to our general fund because I live in a rural corner of Oregon and I'm a member of a small congregation. So resources, ministries, and relationships developed by the Synod connect potentially isolated folks like me to this wild web.
Thanks, Vicki. But no offense. Boring. I mean, sure, but have you all heard about some of the amazing new innovative ministries that are emerging all around the state? Like Story Dwelling and Revillage in Bend, that's making affordable housing, no, I'm sorry, that one's not housing, affordable childcare, accessible childcare for their whole city by organizing with their local community. Or St. Mark's in Portland and Gloria Day and Coos Bay that are listening to their neighbors right now and discerning how to build affordable housing on their land that they steward. Or all of the sacred organizing cohorts across the state that are acting together toward important issues that really matter, like climate justice, immigrant justice, housing justice, racial justice, and repair. Woo! This work is making sure that all of God's creation in Oregon can thrive and flourish. I'm the co-chair of the Courageous Stewardship Table.
Yeah, Jeannie.
And I give to the Courageous Love Fund because I believe in investing courageously and building new and innovative structures with the foundational boards that Bishop Lori talked about earlier today. Our future is not in four walls of a church building, and the gospel is not insular.
Okay, simmer down, you two. It's not either or. It's both and. It's always both and. And we need it all to be the synod together, heart to heart. So, just like we need every one of each of us and our neighbors and partners to listen, to hear God's calling us, to nurture this wild web God has made and is still weaving among us. In fact, we have two more wild web representatives right here who I think want to share some stories. Pastor Jessica Butland.
Hello, I am Pastor Jessica Putland and Melissa at St. Matthew in Beaverton. I'm learning to continue to announce that. Melissa reached out to me to share my stewardship story with the Synod and the wider ELCA in St. Matthew. And I want to begin by mentioning that I'm a cradle Lutheran. And the reason why I was able to stay Lutheran and follow my call was because I was in high school when the 2009 decision passed. And so for me, that kept my faith going. It gave me faith in our faith. So the synods that I grew up in and that I'm now rostered in, synod that I'm now rostered in, are very, very important to me and my sense of call and my sense of faith. And St. Matthew, where I was an intern and now am called to, has an interesting history with the Synod and has an interesting history in giving with the Synod. And so when I came to St. Matthew, conversations began between myself and lay leadership and staff about what it would look like to increase our giving in the Synod and become more involved. You are told time and time again as a pastor that you shouldn't talk about money, right? People are like, no one wants to hear your pastor talk about money. No one's heard that before besides Dorothy. Okay. I hear that. Jokingly, people tell me no one wants to hear their pastor talk about money, but I have those conversations, especially with my board. I give my own personal time to the Synod, both on the personnel committee and in the Washington County Sacred Organizing Cohort. Those are very life-giving spaces for me, but also last year, I asked St. Matthew to increase their percentage of giving to the Synod. And when we received the email from Bishop Lori about giving a year-end gift. We actually had already finished our budget process for the year, but I brought it to our board anyway, and I asked them if they would consider giving, I think, $1,000 towards the Synod so that these important ministries could keep going. And our secretary looked at me and he said, well, why not double that? And then someone else said, well, let's just round that off and make it $2,500. So we gave our year-end gift at the end of January to the Synod, and it was a great way for us to continue bridging our relationship with the Synod as a congregation, St. Matthew. And for me, it makes it easier to be involved in many ways. So that's my stewardship story.
Thank you, Pastor Jessica. We have one more Wild Web representative who is going to come and share their story, Pastor Jim Abbott.
Thank you. My name is Jim Abbott, and I lived in the Pacific Northwest for 19 years. Unfortunately, that was a long time ago. My wife retired in October of 2018, and I retired in December of 2018, and we were both in Oregon by the 15th of January, 2019. During the 20 plus years before that, we lived in Texas. We now live in Brookings. In case you don't know that, we're almost in California. Thank goodness not in, but it's kind of at the far end of the synod. My wife and I give to our local congregation, and we also get at least a dozen, if not 24, requests in the mailbox every week from wonderful organizations all over the world who want some of our retirement income. We don't give to them all. We can't. But we do make joint decisions about our giving. And one of those decisions has been to regularly support the Oregon Synod General Fund. We give a monthly donation. And we ask why? Well, the Synod is the vehicle, is the framework, the mechanism, the way that all of you, as they say in Texas, all y'all, connect to each other. And those kinds of connections are what make possible the amazing startups, the joint programs. I recall reading about the daycare in Bend, and it's a multi-denominational program. And that kind of thing can only be done with a synod or judicatory, whatever you want to call it, talking to each other at that level to then energize the local congregations to do what they can do. That's not to disparage local congregations. Many of you do wonderful things in your community, and maybe with the church down the road or across the street, but a synod can give you that scale that allows you to accomplish great things. I'm always encouraged to hear about new starts, and I'm always encouraged to hear about what the synod as a whole is leading us into. As I mentioned, we lived in Texas for more than 20 years, and I'm not here to brag on Texas. But during that time, we lived in the Texas-Louisiana Gulf Coast Synod. And if you look that up in the ELCA, you'll discover that it goes the southern half of the entire state of Louisiana. There aren't many Lutherans there. And it goes the Metro Houston, and then it goes west about another 100 miles and north several hundred miles. That single synod is about the size of the state of Oregon. And we were over on the edge. But I recall at least 3 occasions when we got a group from our congregation, the congregation I served, got in a van and went to Houston to clean up after hurricanes and drenching rainstorms that flooded half the city. And again, that kind of response, like wildfire response here, in the moment, on time, as needed, can only be done by having a structure, a synod to lead and organize. So I'm energized by what you guys are doing. I love being here and being part of it. And that's why we give every month to the synod. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica and Jim. It's amazing. And you make the ministry of the Oregon Synod possible through the heartful stewardship of your money and your leadership on the ground, in your congregations and communities, and as a part of this wild web of courageous love.
And let's not forget about the 320 wild web representatives that we have right here. Each of you. Each of your stories matter. Each of your hearts matter. And each dollar that you bring matters. This is how we are and are becoming a wild web of relationship. A communion, discovering life as we seek the life in the world in the liberating spirit that Jesus brings.
And are you ready? We have some wild web representatives from God's wild web of creation coming around to make it official. Go ahead, creatures. Come on. And our ask today is this, folks. If you are inspired by anything about our synod, If you are grateful for anything or anyone like Sarah Gross Samuelson in this wild web, we ask that you use your phone to give just $1 from your heart to the ministry and collective vocation of the Synod today. That's right, we're just today asking for $1. You just hover over that QR code that is on your Wild Web Representative card, VIP card that you just got. It will take you to our giving page. If everyone gives $1, we will raise around $300 to $320 in just 1 minute for the life that Jesus is nurturing through our relationships. And we invite you to stick this card in your wallet too. And every time you notice something, you give a little more. We also have a second ask. And this is for Sunday when you go home or at your next council meeting. Please invite your congregation to do the same. Give from their hearts in hope and gratitude for what the Spirit is already doing and what God's courageous love is inspiring among us. Listen to this. Just 8% more mission support, 8% from each ministry in our synod meets our budget for 2022. Did you hear that? Just 8%. So if, for instance, your congregation gives $10,000 a year in mission support, if you up that to $10,800, you would get us to our goal for 2022. But more importantly, this process of the dreaming that we've been doing, that when we connect our hearts with our money and we tell our stories together, we trust that God's dreams are also coming true here among us in this wild web of life. Thank you, Oregon Synod, Wild Web Representatives, for all of your courageous hearts. And thank you, Wild Web of Creation, for making fools of yourself today.
Wow. Thank you, Courageous Stewardship Table. We've had a lot of courage displayed this day. Thanks to everyone for that. I have a few announcements. Many of them are good news. Karen Haynes, who was taken to the hospital, has food poisoning, which isn't good news, but it could have been worse. She ate something at Starbucks yesterday, that's all I'm saying, on her way here. There is coffee, but don't all go at once. Trickle out if you would, so that we can give due attention and due respect to our Synod Treasurer, Mark Dickman. This is an important conversation ahead. My grand plan to push everything back an hour so that we could continue with our rich debate means that it pushes the banquet back 30 minutes because Sun River staff needs time to turn this room around. So rather than 6:30, the banquet will begin at 7. Thanks for understanding that. And it also means, because they will be doing major turnaround in this room, that we each need to take everything. So clear your table, clear your spot. For the sakes, this is an example of how COVID affects things. The Great Hall has a wedding tonight. And we have 2 sessions, workshops, which have been bumped back an hour. So there will be signage about which ways to enter and which ways to leave. And if you obey, first of all, the hardest part is reading the signs, don't you think? And then kind of following their guidance, we will not interrupt the wedding. Do they need a pastor? Have we got a pastor for you? Or a deacon? If we can just follow the signs, we'll be fine. And the hybrid worship workshop will need to be a little shortened because it's in here, But we've lost one of our presenters, Pastor Steve Dow. His sister-in-law died and there'll be a funeral. So please pray for Pastor Sarah Schaffner. She lost her sister. And we will miss his part of the presentation, but that workshop will be 60 minutes instead of 90. Is that all clear and making sense? All right, thanks for adapting on the fly. Now, let's welcome our amazing and miraculous Synod Treasurer, Mr. Mark Dickman.
Except that it's the Joy Committee. But first, if you're thinking, oh, a QR code, I don't understand, but I have a dollar bill in my hand, have no fear. There is this little lovely repurposed bag that will be at the altar for you to deliver that dollar.
Good afternoon. You know, that's kind of a blatant setup, I think. But to be a good example for you all, but full disclosure, it's seconded. All in favor? That one was bigger than mine. Good afternoon. May I add my welcome to each of you to this long anticipated and overdue in-person Synod Assembly. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I'm here. Before I continue with my script, where did the bishop? Oh, she's over there. Okay, you're fine. You're fine. But I've been hanging on your every word, especially your preaching. Yeah. Yeah. Huh? Yeah, I seriously, I really appreciate that. There was one thing that I heard yesterday that I don't know if I got it right or not. Nancy says she thinks I got it close. You had a line that said something about when you die, folks will gather and tell the menial, trivial ways that you stooped at the feet of others and washed their feet. Something kind of like that, right? Okay. My head always goes ahead on these things, and I thought she was going to say, they're going to gather and tell the menial, trivial ways that you criticized the pastor, the organist, the choir. And boy, was I glad when I heard that message changed. It wasn't what I thought. God, I do hope that when people gather for mine, that they'll forget those menial, trivial criticisms. I want to tell you about the financial affairs of our Synod, as well as present and discuss the fiscal year 2023 budget for your consideration. But before we go there, I need to give you my farm report. It will be brief. It's about technology and agriculture. All of us have learned a lot about technology in this last year with COVID and trying to do church. Here's something that they learned on the farm. Can I have that slide up, whoever's running PowerPoint? So I guess you get it. I took my cues from somebody good, right? You're welcome. I'm not going to read to you the materials that I've already submitted. You've received those as part of the assembly packet and additional materials, and I trust that you have or will take the time to look at them. I'm just going to touch a few highlights. I want to spend the bulk of my time today sharing pie with you. I hope that piques your interest. First, a formality that I want to get out of the way. The independent audit for fiscal year 2021 is finished, although we haven't yet received the published report. Nevertheless, I know that it will be an unqualified opinion, which is the best audit result, It means that there are no issues or concerns, and that's great news, but nothing less than what we expected. Credit for these findings goes to Alice Baker and Karen Dickin at Region 1 Financial Services Office in Mill Creek, Washington, who do all of our bookkeeping tasks so very well. So to the Synod's finances, first a look back. Fiscal year 2021 was positive financially for our Synod. Not as good as we had planned or prayed for, but it's always good when your receipts cover our expenses. Mission support, the unrestricted dollars that your congregation sent to the Oregon Synod, was almost $924,000, up almost $40 over the prior year. Oh, we do get this graph. So here is a graph of mission support since 2005. You see that in 2020, that purple line second from the bottom says 877, and now it says 923. So we made an improvement. We reversed a trend of decline that we had going. At the end of the year, we actually had a $2,700 surplus, which was returned to the primary reserve. 59 congregations or missions gave more in the fiscal year 2021 compared to the prior year. 21 gave the same, 30 gave less. Regardless of where your congregation fits, we thank you for every dollar you've given to Synod and churchwide. Now let's talk about today. We're 3 months into fiscal year 2022. I'm sorry to have to bring bad news, but the truth is mission support is below last year by about $12,000 or 5.7%. That puts us back to about where we were in fiscal year 2020 and a long way from our goal for mission support to reach $995,000 this year. Bishop Lori and her staff are in the middle of an ambitious agenda of work that requires financial support. I urge you to encourage your congregations to consider this as they make their own financial decisions in the coming months. I didn't know exactly what Courageous Stewardship was going to say today. I'm just piggybacking on their message. Our Synod has sufficient financial resources to weather a revenue shortfall, but moving forward, we must pay our way. To live on reserves is unsustainable. We tried unsustainable for a while. Prior to 2020, use of reserves to balance the general fund budget went from $62,000 in 2014 to over $450,000 in 2019. And it averaged over $300,000 per year from 2015 to 2019. There were good reasons to draw on reserves so heavily, but they resulted in a serious erosion of our net worth. The budgets for the last 3 years have all exhibited a high degree of discipline regarding use of our Synod's reserves and restricted funds. From fiscal year 2020 through the proposed budget for fiscal year 2023, our average draw was or will be about $160,000 per year. I think this is more in line with what your congregations expect. So, if I'm going to ask you to do more, and please make no mistake, I am asking, I think you're entitled to say, well, what does it cost? What's the money for? Rather than prepare a bunch of elaborate PowerPoint slides to show you, I'd like you to engage you to draw your own visual aids this afternoon. I hope you'll join me in this exercise and use these things to share this story with your congregation. So find your yellow book. We all had one, and I'm assuming you've got a few empty pages in it. So find something to write in your yellow book with. It's time to share some pie. I'm guessing that most of you have encountered a clock drawing test. If not for yourself, maybe an elderly parent or grandparent. The aim of clock drawing is to see if there's any loss of a person's cognition. I'm not interested in evaluating your cognition. But to get started, we are going to draw clocks. So go to a blank page in your book and draw a circle that pretty well fills the page. Kind of center it, leave some room top and bottom. Now put the numbers on your clock the way they're supposed to go. 12 at the top and 6 at the bottom and on around. Let's see. You're reverse of me. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Put a nice dot in the center where the hands would pivot. Okay, above your first clock, are you drawing clocks, Mr. Parliament? You're helping. Yeah, that's the guy who screwed up the vote report a while ago. So you need, yeah, okay. Okay, above your clock, write the caption, mission support. Mission support. Okay, now draw a line from the dot in the center up to the 12. In fact, right on through it to the edge of the circle. Doesn't have to be an arrow, just a line. Now do the same thing with a line from the center to the 5. What you now have is a pie chart, which is what I'm really trying to get you to draw, not a clock. We're just using the clock numbers as a reference. For those of you who like math, each hour in the clock is about 8 1/3% of the pie. 8 times 12 equals 96%. That's almost 100. That's close enough for this farmer when he's in a tractor seat. In the portion of the pie on the right, on the right-hand side of your clock, write CW. That's for church-wide. 42% of your mission support dollars are passed right on to the ELCA church-wide organization. Sometimes we say Chicago. To fund the work of our presiding Bishop Elizabeth and her staff, for our church's work both in the United States and our missions and ministries around the world. On the remaining portion, the left side of your pie chart, write OS. That's for Oregon Synod. We keep 58% of all mission support dollars in Oregon for the work of our Bishop Lori and her staff and the programs that they bring for us. I think this is a division that is a very important fact that your congregation and its leaders need to know, especially when considering your own budget and what amount your congregation should give to the Synod. In our current fiscal year, mission support that is passed on to church-wide will total about $418,000 if we make our mission support budget of $995,000. And that will leave $577,000 for our Synod. Remember, your mission support funds both the Oregon Synod and church-wide. Okay. Turn the page or go to the other side and start another chart. Go ahead and write the numbers. Put the dot in the center while I have my coffee break. Greg, did anyone bring you coffee when you were up here?
I don't drink coffee.
Oh, well, that explains that. Okay, are you ready? This time, right above it, Synod revenues. Synod revenues. Draw a line from the center through the 12. If you think you're starting to see a pattern, that's how all of these start. Now draw a line from the center to the 9. And in that 3/4 of a pie, a part that's big enough even for me, write mission support, because the mission support that you give to the Synod represents 73% of our total Synod revenue. Draw another line to almost 10, say 9 3/4, and label it DEM. That represents the 9% of revenue that the Synod receives from Churchwide to fund the Director of Evangelical Mission position. Now draw another line from the center to between 10 and 11, but maybe a little closer to 10. So another pretty small piece. And label it CLF. That shows the 6% of general fund revenue that's going to transfer from the Courageous Love Fund, budgeted to be $75,000 in total. Then draw a line from the center to almost 12, say 11 3/4, and in that or by it write savings. That's the 12% that does not come from income, but it is the transfers from various reserved and restricted funds, which are in essence our Synod savings. You should have a little sliver left, and you can label that other because that's just miscellaneous things like interest and that kind of income. Oh, it does include, where did he go? Pastor's monthly individual gift to the Oregon Synod. If you do that, it's going to land in other income as a gift. Okay, one more clock. So turn your page, go to another spot. Let's draw one more clock. You all remember it's a circle, 12, 6, the numbers. Put a dot in the center. I hope you guys are all good at this. Above this clock, write expenses. Now draw a line. This time, let's go from the 12 down to your dot. Yeah, curved ball, but you can do it, Pastor. Through the center and on to the 5. Okay? And mark that section of the pie staff. Almost half of our total expenses, including the part that we send to Churchwide, is compensation for Bishop Lori and her staff to do the day-to-day work. It's just like in your congregations. Lots of our money goes to support our staff. That's a fact of life. Draw a line from the center to the 9 and mark that Churchwide. That's the 42% of mission support that we pass on to Chicago, and it is in essence about 1/3 of our total expenses. Draw another line from the center to between 10 and 11 and label it projects. That represents the $175,000 that the general fund will use to fund our Synod innovation and vitality mission and ministry projects. And draw a line about 2/3 of the way between 11 and 12 and name it O&A, overhead and administrative. That represents the expenses for overhead like insurance and utilities and paper, and it includes our accounting expenses and our transition accrual. Somehow mark that last little sliver that's left, benevolence. That's the grants and gifts we make to affiliated ministries and agencies. This is a very simple illustration of how your mission support is divided up, as well as the total revenue and total expense of the Oregon Synod. I want you to take this home, share it with anybody who will listen, but particularly with your congregation's leaders, especially your church council. It's important to me that they know these things about the Synod's budget in which we are all partners. So the proposed budget for fiscal 2023, I can't add a lot to what you've already seen in the hard copy. The budgets for the past 3 years represent the work Bishop Lori and her staff are leading. They really haven't changed in any substantive way. There's just been minor adjustments, primarily due to inflation. Yes, each one is a bit more than the last, but there are no significant new programs just carrying on the work that Bishop Laurie has chosen and the work that's required to keep our synod running, supporting your congregations. The fiscal 2023 budget was developed in conversation with staff, reviewed by the Finance Committee, and is recommended to you after careful consideration by the Synod Council. It is the collective judgment of all of these parties that this is the right amount of dollars to do our work. I believe this budget proposal is what the Oregon Synod needs to do the work you expect. Now, here's the bottom line. In a few minutes, you'll be asked to vote whether or not to budget for the next fiscal year. Chances are high that you will approve it, if only because I'm so handsome. But we need to do more. It's not enough to vote to approve this budget. We have to own this budget. If our synod is going to do this work, we need to fund it. If your congregation is going to be a part of it, your congregation needs to do its share. Now, I cannot tell you what your share is or what it should be. That's up to you. But I can tell you that all 110 congregations in aggregate need to provide about 7.7% more in this fiscal year. And Pastor Melissa said 8 because she just rounded it up. And if we pass the fiscal 2023 budget as drafted, we need another 2.5% to meet these budget goals. I know that some congregations will be able to provide more mission support. I know some congregations will only be able to do the same. I know some congregations will not be able to provide as much mission support as in the past. But I think every congregation must have discussions asking, what is our part or share in the mission of the synod? Furthermore, every congregation must ask the question, what are we going to accomplish, or how are we going to accomplish our part or reach our goal? If we can't have those discussions, we're just fooling ourselves. And maybe your congregation needs to be asking more basic questions like, what dollars are required to do our mission in this place, including being part of the ELCA? If your congregation is struggling with financial needs, you need to ask yourselves, are we addressing financial issues? I have one piece of advice. I can tell you from experience that congregations that talk about stewardship have fewer problems funding ministry. If you need help having those discussions, the synod is here to help. Remember what you saw just before I came up here. As always, I want to thank all the people who put time, energy, and emotion into this financial work. I also want to engage more of you to be part of the financial work of our synod. If you have interest in this sort of thing, I'd love to hear from you. I'm always looking for fresh new thinking on our finance committee. The Courageous Stewardship Table also would welcome more folks to engage their work. Finances is not what Oregon Synod, the ELCA, or your congregation is about. But it's the fuel that makes it run. We have to have these discussions and do this work in order to be good stewards of our treasure. Finally, I'd like to develop a more far-reaching relationship with the people in your congregation who deal with financial things, especially your treasurers. My contact information is at the bottom of my written report. You are welcome to email me or call me anytime. Yeah, I got 1 minute over here, it says, but I do have a special dispensation. I'm almost done. If you are not, if you are the treasurer of your congregation, would you please reach out to me so I've got your email? And if you're not the treasurer, would you please go home and encourage your treasurer to contact me? We're always stronger when we work together. As a farmer, I anticipate springtime. It's the time of new life, of planting, of blooming, of great beauty and great promise. I submit it's springtime for the Oregon Synod and for God's church. With that spirit, I offer the fiscal year 2023 budget for your discussion and adoption. Thanks for all the encouragement that you give me in this task. Blessings in your day. Bishop Laurie.
Thank you, Mark. It's now time to entertain questions about the budget, I do believe. So if you have any questions, please go to the yes or the no mic. Okay, seeing none.
Madam Chair, for the Synod Council, I move adoption of this budget.
And because it comes from the Synod Council, this does not require a second. So this is another moment to reach for your voting cards. The question is on the adoption of the budget as presented, which comes from the Synod Council. Vote yes if you are in favor of the Assembly adopting the budget. Thank you. Vote no if you're opposed. Abstain, raise your white cards. Voting is closed. The budget passes. Thank you. Mark Dickman puts in thankless hours. And I suspect nights where he wakes up in the middle of the night and says, wait, I've got to adjust line 52B. So really, we owe him a tremendous debt of gratitude. I am so grateful. We'll now conduct our voting. We will be electing positions to Synod Council, boards, committees, and churchwide council. The churchwide council is unusual. Synods don't send names to the churchwide assembly every time the assembly meets. The churchwide assembly only meets every 3 years, used to be 2. They've adjusted their rhythm. And it's 1,000 Lutherans coming together, if you can imagine that. Coffee, yeah, it's a crisis if there's, and so it's our turn to nominate, and we will nominate 2 names to that position, but it's churchwide assembly that votes on the position. Nominees can be found in your assembly book. Most of these are uncontested elections. I would love to invite one of the 2 on the elections committee to come forward, Deacon Bonnie Beatles Bowling. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Laurie. Biographical information on the nominees can be found in the Assembly booklet or on the Assembly webpage. For the contested position, 2 copies of the bios were placed on your table after lunch for your review. Is that accurate? Okay, good. For the uncontested elections, for which there is just 1 candidate, we will be voting using our voting cards. On the series of 2 slides behind me, you will see the nominees for each role. And it's okay to vote now? Sorry, I'm a little. Great. Wonderful. We are now voting whether to elect the slate of nominees just reviewed on the slides into the corresponding synod positions. Vote yes with your green card. Thank you. Vote no with your red card. Or abstain with your white card. I declare the voting closed. The affirmative has it, and I declare that the people on this slate are elected. On the screen behind me now, you see the contested position of churchwide council. Ballots should be being passed out. Is there a mechanism for the ballots to be passed out?
The deans should be passing the ballots out. Deans, please, if you would go to the secret corner. As the deans are passing out the ballots, there needs to be a little bit of clarification. And this may be what Pastor Couch is going to ask. Last year, we elected one person to be presented to the Churchwide Assembly in 2022, Jennifer Traum. But little did your bishop realize that we need to give them more than one name. We need to give them two. So we are electing between these two nominees the second name to accompany Jennifer Troms to the Churchwide Assembly in August. Is that abundantly murky? Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes. If you are a dean who inadvertently took a lot, you took them from other deans who need them. So if you find yourself with more ballots in your hand, please give them to Tyler Bean Kelly, whose cluster will be bereft. And please don't vote until you're instructed. So just pause for a minute while we get them all handed out. Thank you.
If you still need a ballot, please raise your hand so a dean might get one to you.
Thank you. Raise your hand if you don't yet have a ballot. Don't vote yet.
This is my ballot. Thank you.
Does everyone in the room who is a voting member have a ballot? Almost. Okay. Voting for the nominee to Churchwide Assembly for Churchwide Council is now open. You may write the name of one of these two nominees, which are on the screen, on your ballot. Fold your piece of paper. Hold it up and your dean will receive. Thank you, deans.
Yes.
Please raise your hand
That'd be
if
great.
you have not submitted your ballot so your dean may receive. I see a few ballots still out. Raise your hand if your ballot hasn't been received, one in the corner.
Bless you.
Okay, few more ballots still to be received. One in the corner, two in the corner. Few more dawdlers. Okay. I now declare voting closed. Thank you for being quick on your feet and flexible in your brain. You will hear later on in the plenary sessions, probably tomorrow, the results of that vote.
I can do it. I'll check in with you in a minute.
Mostly, I want to say congratulations and thank you to those who were elected to serve on Synod committees, Synod boards. If you were one of those people whose name was on the previous slide, please stand up. Many of them aren't here. They aren't the voting members. Thank you. Without your volunteer energy, we cannot be Synod on the road together into God's courageous love. Thank you. A few announcements and then we're off. We do. Okay, so I agree with our Synod Vice President who's suggesting yet another agenda change, but we have almost an hour before 4 o'clock, which was when we thought we would need to begin our workshops. We could have our workshop really pretty soon, not at 3, because what time is it? But you could have potty break time and walk to your workshop, and we could probably start around 3:20. Right? Let's start at 3:20-ish, and that way we can almost go back to our original schedule. I know, moans and groans, but you'll be happy late at night when you get to go to bed. So wait, a few announcements, and then we're dismissed. Okay. I'm getting resistance from staff, let's say 3:30. Melissa Reed, pastor, has a few announcements for us. And Mark Knudsen has a question.
Will we have enough time tomorrow to do all 3 resolutions? Because
we hope so, it depends.
We have 2 left. Just want to make sure. Very important. Okay.
Please come super ready to engage the resolution so that we do have enough time. Pastor.
We will now break until 3:30 when the workshops begin. After the workshops end at 5, there's a hour and a half break until there is an hour and a half break until dinner at
6:30 or 6:30.
Is the hotel, we just changed it. Are they going to be able to change it again? That's my curiosity.
What do you think it's at? Okay. So it's at 7.
Okay, so dinner is at 7 back here in the ballroom, where we will hear from parliamentarian David Swertling about constitutions as ethical, theological, legal, and missional documents. Later, if you want to join in, there will be a dance party organized by a Storyline community in the other building starting at 8:30. Probably a little bit later, maybe because everything's pushed. Come show off your moves and have a good time. Tomorrow morning during breakfast, our exhibitors will each be at a breakfast table available to connect with, build relationships with, and answer any questions. Please come drop in and chat with them between 7 and 8:15 a.m. And now, oh, we've already had the coffee break, but you can run out there if there's any more drips. A big thank you to Legacy Emmanuel Medical Center Campus Chapel, serving Legacy Emmanuel Children's Hospital, and the Oregon Burn Center, who is sponsoring our coffee break. You can find out more about the Chapel Project by connecting with Pastor Melinda Wagner, who will be near the coffee service, or by picking up one of their postcards at the coffee service. Please enjoy, and we'll see you at workshops.
Thanks, everyone. 3:30 workshop, 7 o'clock banquet. Take all your things.